Yes, thank you very much, and welcome, everybody. So, thanks, Clark, for this great introduction. So I'll pick up on some of the points, and maybe it's taking 1 second to take a step back. So, 2018, we're having about 4 billion people using the internet. So if they all switch on their devices and hold it up to the sky at night, the world looks like this, right? So you can see the nice light spots in the middle. So Europe did a quite good job in terms of internet penetration. So we have 400 million people in Europe using the internet. The only problem where we didn't pay attention, as we heard from previous speakers, is with regard to value creation. So value creation still goes the same way. And we have the new iPhone coming up, so it all takes the same process. We have somebody designing software and operating systems over there in Silicon Valley. They find some manufacturers over in Asia to produce the hardware so they can make some money with the hardware. They ship it to Europe. Europe then can earn a few dimes on the retail margin, if there is one, on hardware. Connectivity for the telcos is going okay, but as soon as you connect your device to the internet, the real business model starts. Your device starts to pump the data over to where the generator of this whole process was and is sitting, and that's where the real money is coming from. So what this is creating is a big smile, but unfortunately not for us in Europe. Because money gets created here, and money gets created here, and the other ones are taking the big monies out of this market. And this is because, well, we all heard last year, previous years, oil and data are the same right now. So people would say, oh yes, obviously there's no European company on this picture. And some might say, oh, there isn't even Europe on this picture. Yes, it is. We're the oil field below this platforms, right? So they're pumping this oil out. But unfortunately, we don't have pumps and we don't have pipes. And so no surprise that we have to obey the rules that these companies are setting. And no surprise that the online advertising market is looking like this. So 2/3 are controlled by Google and Facebook. Some might say, well, at least we have these 37%. It's not too bad. But then if you look underneath it, and this is a picture of the marketers, what technology they are using to make these 37%. Then if you color in red in this structure from ad server to supply-side platforms to AdXs, DSPs, SSPs, and don't ruin your eyes. So we'll make everything that's from Google in red, then this picture looks like this, right? So out of the free market, of these 1/3 of the market that's still free, 2/3 of the technology are controlled by Google again. So that gives us to the picture market shares on digital advertising, ad tech, 2/3, 3/4 to 2 companies, same on social media, obviously, same on search. It just takes 1 company to eat up 90% of the market in Europe. Mobile operating system, no surprise, there's a 3% share left for the Nokias and the, well, who else is there? Microsofts and so on and so forth. This picture on browsers looks a little bit more fragmented, but my bet is that if Firefox keeps going the way it goes, we'll have a 3/4 market share for Google and Apple as well. How critical this is for the market shows the following case study. So if some of you are familiar with Criteo. Criteo is one of the largest players in the world. It used to be when it comes to retargeting. So it's a French-based company, European business. They did quite well until Apple last year announced that they would stop the access to third-party cookies to 24 hours. A couple of weeks later, they had to release information to the market that they're seeing a sales impact of 22% due to this means from Apple, which is quite significant if you keep in mind that their traffic share of Safari is about 20%. That means that they eliminated the business model of Criteo just with one little tweak in the system of the Safari browser. So stockholders, shareholders, of course, didn't like that message and dropped the share 27% on one day. So this gives us 2 learnings. One, who controls the pipes and the pumps has the on and off button for each and every business model in this room. And secondly, if you build your data models based on cookies, you're in trouble, right? So an average website right now is planting about 100 to 150 third-party cookies on one visit. So that's quite a lot, but a lot of those cookies are lost anyway. So with multi-device usage, well, cookies are useless anyway, so because you can't track users across devices, what that means. Secondly, we have ad blockers, cookie blockers, so they block about 25% of the browsers in the market. So you won't reach them with cookies today already. Then we have browsers like Apple, cutting another 20% out of the market. So that leaves us with 45% already being cut out of the markets just due to technology. If other browsers follow, this pile gets lower. So we don't even need to pound on the politicians in Europe for claiming, oh, you're taking away the basis for our business models. That's already happening. So GDPR and EPR, of course, are not doing a big favor to cookies. They'll kill the rest, but anyway, there won't be much left anyway. So the big problem with this is, if the cookie era is coming to an end, that the industry right now is storing everything on cookies, right? So we have the identifier as a cookie. So you identify users based on cookies. You even store the permissions that we're all collecting right now in cookies. So you plant a cookie if you're allowed to track that data. It's on a cookie. Everything in data, age, gender, interest, intent, everything is stored on these little cookies that you store in the devices. The challenge is that's the only open standard we have in the market right now. Two other companies have been a little smarter. So the walled garden player number one, Facebook, normed everything to the Facebook ID. So that's quite smart because that's server-based and you don't have to rely on cookies, right? Same with Google. So they started 5 years ago to norm everything on their Gmail address. So if you were a Google user a couple of years ago, all of a sudden you got a notice, say, please use your Gmail account to log in, even if you used another username-password combination in advance. So they merged everything to Gmail, which was a very smart move because they saw this coming and merged everything to an identifier that's not based on cookies. For the rest of the market, it will mean if the cookies are gone, your data is gone. And as we heard on the previous presentations, no ID, no data, no future. Right, so, and even if somebody says, oh, well, we still have AI, as the chart from Clark just pointed out, artificial intelligence without data is just useless intelligence, right? So data is even more important than the algorithm that you put into an AI system, and if you don't have data, you'll be gone. So what do we do in Europe? Each individual fish is, of course, too small to compete. So no matter what we do, no matter how much capital we raise for one of those small fishes, the race won't be turned around like this, right? So if you want to turn around, this is the only picture it works. You have to form alliances, right? If we all get our stuff together, and we'll see on slides where we stand if we got our data together in comparison to the big fishes, international fish in the ocean, then it could look like this. And this is the reason why we got together with some partners and formed the European NetID Foundation. So NetID Foundation is based on 4 pillars. A, it's an open standard. It's not a company, it's an open standard that we're trying to build for the market. It starts with a comprehensive ID, so a unified identifier that you can use on all platforms. So it's a competitive system against Facebook Connect or Google OpenID, and it allows the user to set up an ID with every company he already has an account with or he wants to have an account with. And it gives the industry an opportunity to form an open ecosystem that is independent and that is open, because we're missing this open standard for IDs. That's the big problem that we're all facing. They're open standard for everything, but not for the ID management. So secondly, we've took as a form of organization, and we didn't take a .com. We focused on a .org approach because we thought this is the only way you could unite the industry in all European countries if you make this a non-profit approach. So we're trying to get an infrastructure together and form this standard so that each and every company can join this standard. The founding members are RTL, the group RTL, GMX, Web.de from United Internet with 1&1, the Pro7 some big media players in Germany, and Zalando as the first partner on e-commerce. So those 4 companies sat together for 1.5 years and tried to figure out how to set up this standard. The standard works this way, that it's a decentralized standard. So the key system of the NetID is a central broker. So this system is doing nothing else but handling different accounts from all account providers you have. So wherever you have an account with Web.de, GMX, RTL, Pro7, Maxdom, some of those players who have already username and password set up, or any other account provider who wants to join this network, wants to connect to this system, you can use immediately to log into any other site that is supporting the standard. So from the beginning on, we'll have about 40 million accounts already set up, 40 million active accounts in this network already there. So the problem you usually have with those systems, if you start from scratch, is that you have the chicken and egg problem, right? So if nobody has a key, nobody will implement keyholes, and if there are no keyholes, nobody wants to have a key. So we at least got the chickens, so now we just need to collect eggs. So these are the players that we're accumulating for the previous month. So I'm happy that we'll be able to announce over a dozen new partners to the NetID Foundation next week on the Demexco in Cologne. So each and every partner who's offering their users the opportunity to log in with a NetID, as they do with a Facebook ID or a Google ID, could connect to the system, and then allows the user to use his user account he set up with any of those companies below. On top of that, we offer the opportunity to share a privacy center backbone. So if we all need to ask the same questions to the user, am I allowed to use your data for this and for that and for this and for that? And we're all in the same legislation in Europe, so why not try to standardize these questions? It makes it much easier for the user, and it makes it much easier for the industry to share that data if the user gave his consent. Right? Because otherwise, if you want to partner with one company and the fishes somewhere want to act together in concert, what they need to do is first have a data due diligence on the other partner and then build interfaces. So if we build it the way from the beginning on that we have interfaces and a common standard at least around how we collect opt-ins and permissions from the user, it'll make life much easier. So this is, in one slide, trying to explain the European NetID Foundation. One of the key points is that our focus is to store all data in Europe. The data ecosystem, if you compare it to the other players, so digital footprint, example for Germany here, so Amazon has about 20 million users, uses data from its own platforms, so the depth of the data is not too deep yet, but if you take off the data that's collected on the Alexas and so on and so forth, of course, this will deepen over time. Same with Google. So Google is probably the best company to leverage its data outside of its own platform. So with Google Analytics and all other means, operating system trackers, IDs on the browsers and everything. So Google sees about 6 of 10 pages a user is visiting. So Google probably has the best ecosystem in terms of in-depth to the user. Facebook, a few more users in Germany with registration and login. Facebook Pixel is helping them to see about 5 of 10 pages a user uses. So, but NetID Foundation has about 40 million users to start with, all focused data on their own platforms. But of course, the more partners you get on board, you can see that the square can get bigger, the ecosystem can get bigger than the proprietary ones from US competitors. So this is a chance, and I think the potential alliances have on one page. Then let me finish with one slide. So this has been the path of Europe, the road for Europe for digitalization. So if we keep on going this road, give up critical infrastructure to other companies, work rather against each other than with each other, and stay too passive, I think this is our digital future, right? So next 10 years, hopefully we'll still have people attending DLD then, but this is the road we're heading here, right? So if we don't get one of the next exits here, and alliances might be one answer to that, but there aren't too many exits coming, especially on the data play. If we don't figure out a way how to identify users, it's impossible to really track data and allocate data. So this is one exit that we offer to try to offer to the industry right now, and with that, I'd like to open it up for the panel and say, let's go Europe. Thank you.
So maybe we shall discuss about going on a diet of vegetables and starting to figure out what would be the Brussels sprouts that we would be growing here. But I think we're really getting into the major topic of the day. Indeed, as we saw in the first presentations, in key technologies, we seem to be lagging behind. We do have great market share. We have great scientists in different universities. We have entrepreneurs who are doing a great job. But still, in the larger race, it seems that we have a lot of things to do. And as The Guardian wrote a few weeks ago, are we too sleepy, or should we wake up in this new reality which is coming? And especially thinking also the political changes that will happen next year and forward. And before we kick off the panel, I actually have a question. So how many people are from Google, Facebook, or Amazon here? One. So a typical situation. So we're talking about the big players, and only one is here. But I hope we will have a great dialogue, and after the session, we'll be able to discuss what would be the alliances, not only within Europe, but maybe internationally potentially. But in this session, we're going to focus on 3 topics. So we're going to talk about the NetID and the alliances around identification, data, and telcos. Then we talk about artificial intelligence, which is the oil for the future. And then we'll also a little bit look on the political side of things, on how we can actually get things done. So, Jan, I would like to kick off with you to talk more about the practical sides of the NetID. So, having been launched the initiative right now, so what is the status update right now, and where are we really going on the practical terms? Because historically, there's been many attempts to create, open authorization platforms, both on government sector and on private sector. So, how does NetID, stand the side of it, and what is the magic sauce? How will you make it happen?
Yeah, thank you. So I think the biggest piece of work was really setting up the structure, finding a structure how companies can collaborate, building something around the antitrust and competition law, because of course that's harming some of the alliances that tried to form in the past. And so we figured that out. We found the first founding partners. We got the first partners on board, and we'll announce over a dozen new partners next week. So technology is ready, so everything you've seen on the slide is already ready, and we'll present it to Mexico next week. So now we're going into the second phase of collecting partners and hoping that we'll find a lot of companies in the market that will not only offer a Google login opportunity, Facebook Connect login opportunity, but also add NetID to their portfolio. So technology is based on OpenID, so if you implemented those standards, it's a couple of days' work to add another standard. And then we hope that we find more partners, even more partners in Germany, but also in Europe. So we're in talks with companies in Italy, in Austria, Netherlands, and France and parts. So we're happy to join, to welcome every company in Europe that wants to participate in that standard.
So what's the sales point? Why, if they already have these quite convenient logging systems in place, maybe their own proprietary ones as well, so why should they come on board? What's the sort of the practical value?
Yeah, I think that's
besides the whole political aspect.
That's why we had the opening slides. So I think the US companies have been very, very smart at implementing infrastructure, giving infrastructure away for free, as it always was with Google Analytics, with you can name hundreds of examples, and through that way implementing their standards and having the data being rolled on their platform through their platforms. And I think if you realize that strategic problem that you're facing, then I think the answer is quite clear that you need to act and do something on your own. And if you outsource the ID management to those companies, I think it will be very clear where this race will end. If you have to rely on Google and Facebook, who don't give you any guarantee that they'll support your standard, that they'll support your login standard in 5 years from now, and that will be for free forever. I think then you come to the conclusion that you have to act, and the NetID is one of the solutions in the market that gives you an opportunity to stay and keep control over your own data.
Let's now flip to the users. So I already have my Facebook ID, I have my Google ID, I have my email ID, I have my national ID. There's another ID. So, as you said, there's about 40 million users or accounts already registered. So will it be an opt-in system? Will it be a compulsory system? How do you get people in? Because they already have the convenience factor, right? So it will just become another email address or an alias. So, yeah, so how that strategy is?
That's exactly the challenge we see in the market as well. So, and exactly as you pointed out, usually users have a Gmail ID through their Android system. They have a Facebook ID, but they have an email ID, as you said. And that's why we said, let's not create the system in a way that you have to create new accounts. You can use any existing account that you have already, especially your email account, your native email account. You can just use that address, which you usually do anyway, but you can use the same password. Mm-hmm. I think that's the only opportunity we have, taking the accounts that users already have and turn them into general keys. This gives the user the opportunity not to have to handle an additional ID, but just use one of their IDs you already have in place, and use that on different sites. And of course, the user has to understand that the convenience of Google and Facebook comes at a price, and this is what we're trying to set up differently.
Do they really know?
Yeah, I think they start to, at least the surveys we have is, yes,
or
they know about
care?
it. They know about it. It's a little bit like, well, should you take your car to go to the grocery store if it's just 500 meters away? People say, oh, no, I know it's not good, but it's so convenient, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we're getting at this stage, and just people need to get over that hurdle. Say, okay, if it's not raining, at least I'm going to walk this day to the grocery store, not take the car, at least take an electric car.
So it's not going to be about cookies, but it's going to be about Brussels sprouts.
We're trying to be the electric car, so to convince the people that this gives you more choice. And still, not everybody in this room probably all have Facebook IDs, but they luckily only have 50% market share in Europe so far. So there's the other 50% that still has a lack of single sign-on system.
You talked about the idea of data as oil, and potentially NetID being the sort of plumbing system for the data. So, having a look at the information that you have available on the project, and playing a bit of a devil's advocate here, I'm really wondering that how the whole data processing will then happen, because we need to pool the data, and I could say that the NetID is another convenient form of complying with GDPR. So once we have the compliance in place, how would you see the real benefits of the consolidated data? So is there any discussion on these mechanisms as well? Because we do need that data for initiatives, for example, that Andreas is running in Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are always two sides. So industry, of course, has a lot of ideas what to do with all that data. But it's obvious that the more data you have, the better your product for the user will be. So Facebook is so successful because each and every individual has its personalized feed, right? So that's why Instagram is working. You only see the pictures you're interested in. And no feed will be the same in this room. And this is only possible if you have that data, if you have the personalized data. The more data you have, the better the product for the user. So that's the one thing. And of course, the industry needs standards in order to match data, technically being able to match data and legally being able to match data. And we need a system that brings those two things together. And the NetID standard is offering that opportunity to be the backbone, technically as well as legally, to combine data. And if the user agrees to it, at least you have the opportunity as an industry to work across platforms.
Can you give me... Later. Yes, you are allowed to ask questions. But give me really a practical example here, because right now we're talking about it hypothetically, and many of us are from media companies, and we do need data, and we need to get things done. So say we will meet in DLD after 1 year here, and I'm like, okay, what has happened? What have we gained? Are the machines running? So in an ideal scenario, I have my NetID. So how would the exchange of real data happen between the players, say like a GMX and an online shopper, maybe an Estonian telco and so forth? So what is the sort of underlying principle there?
Yeah, so an easy demo of the system would be that you just take your existing web.de GMX account. So you have to log on your smart TV on want to watch RTL or ProSieben. You have to, of course, identify yourself in the app. So you just do that with one click, because you can use your same ID on your TV, on your smartphone. Then you onboard with just one click. You can transfer your profile from web.de GMX, so your name, your gender, your age, if you want. So if you say, well, your age is none of your business, you can leave the age out, that's no problem. And just with one click, you just can click through and have a registered account with RTL or ProSieben. And then you have the opportunity to set settings for your opt-ins. So probably there's nobody in the room from RTL or ProSieben, but from a user perspective, they might not make a distinction between the two channels. So if I'm allowing them to use my gender to give me better advertising, allowing them to use my age, at least the year of birth, so I can get something that's tailored to my generation, and I give them the opportunity to at least target content to me that I don't have to watch things that are not interested for me. I can copy the settings of permissions from one company to the other with one click. Right, so and that makes it very convenient for the user to somehow handle all these consents that are requested by law now, and transfer profiles for settings from one company to the other. And if both companies have the permission to match that data, so data, user profile, I can generate on ProSieben, can be transferred to RTL, so they don't bother me with daily soaps, and they can welcome me with sports programs if I'm interested in sports programs. So this is how it could look like in 1 year from now. So technically, it's all there. So we just need the partners to join the network.
So how can we sign up? There's 400, 300 people in the room. So
yeah. So we have our CEO of the foundation. He's on his way. Unfortunately, he took the Deutsche Bahn. And, Deutsche Bahn turned into Deutsche Bus on halfway because the train broke down. But he'll be here this afternoon.
Yeah. So we definitely need data on mobility.
He'll have his, or you can hand me your card, and so it's quite easy to. It's more or less free to join the foundation, and to collaborate on that standard and take the standard to from the 1.0 that we're starting with to the 2.0, 3.0, whatever.
Thank you. Sure. And this basically leads us to Andreas. there is a problem of Deutsche Bahn, Deutsche Bus, which you can solve with applied AI and artificial intelligence. So, your unit has been doing some amazing work around European AI community, and it seems that we are not lagging that much behind if we compare to US and China in respect, at least, of the activities. So, would you a little bit explain what Applied AI initiative is? And first of all, what is Applied AI? So, question to the audience, who knows what is Applied AI? So, Andreas,
Yeah.
answer to the quiz.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about applied AI, and that came from initially this year, Germany and France announced this German-French AI initiative, and they were on talking about research. And what we said is that actually, if you look at the overall AI in your business and actually use cases. You talk about the algorithm about 10%. That's 10% of the effort you have is really designing the algorithm. There are a couple of standard libraries you're typically using. And the rest, the 90% of the work you do is data collection, data aggregation, optimization, algorithm optimization, implementation, and then actually controlling the algorithm. So that's 90% of the effort we don't talk about if you talk about AI. So if you really want to apply artificial intelligence to business, we need to talk also about the 90%. So research is one part, which is very important, but for the industry is actually also the other 90%. And that's like the basic idea behind applied AI. On the one hand, on the other hand, if you talk about Moonshots, like applied AI is part of Unternehmertum, which is the largest entrepreneurship center in Europe. And if you look at startups, and AI startups in particular in Germany now, there is no single startup in the CB Insights 100 top AI startups. So if you see that AI is actually one of the technologies in the future, we really have a problem here, that there is no significant startup coming from Europe. There's quite a number. We count 130, which are quite nice. And doing okay, and also technology-wise are really leading, but still on the global level, there is no really large startup coming from our country, and that's a problem for the future. So the next DAX companies won't be the AI startups for us. So these two things were the basic idea where we said, okay, we need to found Applied AI as a non-profit initiative, where we really do actually three things, which is knowledge exchange. So we just talk about AI because AI is a learning field for all of us. Technology evolves so fast that we really can be better and even faster if we learn from each other and share experiences. Second is do prototypes, to joint prototypes, so then like kind of an ecosystem approach. And third is education, because AI is first of all a talent problem for many companies, and not only talents in terms of the researchers and the AI like top specialists, but also about like coming from a C-level on AI strategy down to really engineers, to experts in specific fields, chemists, engineers, doctors, who need to understand what AI is about. So it's
Can I run another quiz? So out of the people from companies, how many of you have an AI strategy? Oh, so Andrea still has many people to meet later. And so if you look at the larger picture and in the media, it seems that Google seems to have an AI, and the other big players need to have AI. And in Europe, we don't have an AI. And then some of the things what you have been talking about is that in between these two, we could have a unique European AI, and we don't necessarily mimic others.
Yeah, I think the idea for Europe is actually that we have a couple of strengths, and one strength is our industrial base. So if you talk about B2B AI, not just consumer-facing, which is more in the media. We really could use the specific domain knowledge we have in our industry and really transfer this specific knowledge to solutions, to use cases, and I think that's the huge potential we have in Europe. But that also means that we have to see AI technology companies as suppliers, as enablers for us to build new use cases on specific industry and specific solutions. And then again, we need to have the understanding that AI, really, if it's a transformational, disruptive technology, it's about the ecosystem. So if you talk about autonomous driving, if you talk about the healthcare system of the future, it's not only one specific company. It's the insurance companies, it's infrastructure providers, it's the tech companies. They all need to work together to follow this larger vision behind a specific field or industry.
And in that respect, I think there can be also quite healthy cooperation between the public and the private sector. So you mentioned about Canada as an interesting example in that regard.
I think, yeah, so we talk about China, we talk about the US, but the more interesting approaches are, for example, Canada. They really specifically invest in industries. They have Scale AI for AI in supply chain, 200 million, which is for, say, a bit smaller country, quite some number to join and to jointly develop specific, a couple of companies to jointly develop really use cases for AI and supply chain. There is a creative destruction labs who somehow connects the best experts on AI and actually manages to build unicorns and quite a number of unicorns. So there is a non-profit initiative where simply the best people work together and support startups being created. So I think we need to talk about these kind of platforms and enablers like yours, but this is the basis for then the Moonshots really to being created on top of these.
And you have an open call for others to join the Applied AI initiative as well, am I right?
Yeah, so we started in Munich, specifically at Unternehmertum, but so at the moment we're involved in this German AI strategy. So the next step definitely is on a German level, but obviously if you talk about AI, it needs to be on a European level. So at the moment we are talking to a couple of people from other countries to really form this as a concept, as kind of an initiative where we really closely work together. And our approach is we're a startup center. So we do things, we test things out, we go step by step, and that's what we want to do here as well. So we don't want to spend like 2 years in building concepts on AI, but we really get started on day one. And that's kind of approach, and that's the kind of partners we're looking.
Lucas, considering that we have a great initiative around identification, we have groups of people working on the AI. So in the larger political climate, where are we now? How we've come to this point, and how we can get more things done to have these European moonshots?
That's right. Let's talk about the political alliances we need to build too. So a year from now, when we're sitting here for DLD 19, we'll have held the European elections, and the candidates for the posts of the new commissioners for the new European Commission will be going through their hearings as we speak across the street. So the question is, what are the alliances we're going to have to carry us to 2025 or 2030? And I think we can start by looking back at how the DSM went as a process and where we did and didn't do well. Now, Clark talked about the regulatory stack. You left a lot out. I mean, there's regulations on contract laws, parcel delivery, on tax, on cybersecurity, e-government. At the same time, though, there are ways in which that was a very narrow stack. I mean, first of all, what we didn't do is we didn't go into the way that digital disruption is affecting pretty much every sector of the economy. And a lot of the work is going to be around enabling technology, enabling what AI or blockchain can do in finance, in transport. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to go and write a new AI or a new blockchain law, but it means that the next time we're reviewing a directive on road transport, we're going to have a lot of tweaks we need to make. The next time that we're updating banking regulations, we're going to have a lot of tweaks we need to make. The other way in which the DSM was really limited is it was about primary legislation. or secondary legislation, sorry, but legislation, so lawmaking. That's a really slow process in Europe by design, in a similar way that US legislation is a slow process by design. It's meant to get both 28 sovereign governments and a parliament that separately also represents those same 400 to 500 million people to all agree on something. The average time to pass a bit of legislation is 18 months, which means you don't actually want to write in the types of things you might want to update on a time frame of, say, less than 10 years. Now, Brussels is good at doing legislation, but there are many other ways in which governments generically act. We act through funding. I used to work for a government, so I still sometimes say we. Governments act through funding. They act through building consensuses through their convening power. Often they act with the implicit threat of regulation without actually doing that. Now, those are all forms of action that have historically been much harder for Europe to use in a coordinated way than they are for national governments. You know, Europe is not a sovereign government, and it always has 28 different opinions when it tries to go and do something that is within the domain of national governments. So that is another big limitation on how Europe has so far been able to act. So what are the types of new alliances that we might build? Well, first of all, to pick up on the Moonshots idea, it's a fantastic one. The question is, what is the role of government in those moonshots? I don't have a complete answer, but one of the things I postulate is that government will do best when talking about the social outcomes to be achieved around health, around the environment. You know, we saw the huge number of protocols that are currently being developed. You and I have no idea which decentralized identity protocol, which integrity protocol is actually going to prevail 5 years from now. And it's particularly tricky to get into making those choices in Europe because the way that process looks is that the Estonian government has its Estonian blockchain company with its protocol. The French government has the protocols it's like. So if you get the governments involved in coming up with a process where governments have a say in which is the protocol we use, we're not necessarily going to be doing anything other than picking the next Minitel. So we need to make those moonshots.
So we need to get next time a French speaker here.
Yeah. We need to make the moonshots. And to make those moonshots, we have to have new political alliances. You know, the old sort of national political alliances was basically the Northern European countries against the sort of Southern European countries, and France, Germany kind of pivoting in the middle. Now that model's broken. That game is over. The UK's left. The Nordic liberals don't have the votes to get things together. That doesn't mean we suddenly need to regulate everything. I mean, first of all, the member states need to start looking at things differently and get over some of their mutual distrust of each other. That means, for instance, that you know, a small Northern European country looks at the French-German ideas for a European Innovation Agency and thinks, this looks like Franco-German industrial policy. They need to get over that fear, but they also need to be able to articulate to France and Germany what it is, what are the characteristics of that agency going to have to be so that Sweden or Ireland feels comfortable wholly endorsing its work, putting European funding, putting national funding into it.
And if I'm right, then thinking about, for example, blockchain and AI would be these immense topics that we can address together because the issues in terms of ICO regulation or deregulation enabling key technologies are the same for everybody, right?
Yep. The political alliances are also going to have to be between the national and the local and the regional level. We have a huge amount of European funding that doesn't go to national governments, it goes downwards. How is that money used? How do we actually mobilize the money? Certainly in the case of Bavaria, we heard about the investments they're making, but also the regulatory power, the decentralized decision that local government has, that regional government has to make the right choices. But sometimes we're going to have to take some power away from the local or regional level and think about areas where in the past Europe hasn't acted. I think about education and skills as the obvious example. The other one is around security, and we've seen a lot more European action on security because of migration and terrorism, but if we want to be a geopolitical actor, doesn't mean we have to go and use that joint power all the time, but we need to have the latent ability to act as a single security actor and to get over the mistrust that certainly when it comes to cybersecurity, our intelligence agencies have. So one last kind of alliance, and that's global alliances, which is to say, at the end of the day, our ambition has to be broader than just doing something cool in Europe. I mean, if we're talking about moonshots, these have to be moonshots to solve problems for the world. And since we only have one person here from the GAFA, let me defend them a little bit. I mean, these are complicated companies that have overtaken themselves and been more successful than they could have imagined 10 or 15 years ago. Now, clearly, there are places where we need to clip their wings a little bit, or certainly curtail them with certain rules. On the other hand, you know, we want these people to be making good products. We want them to be making them in Europe. You know, if we look at the effect that using cloud, for instance, has on enterprise productivity, that social media can also have for instance, allowing new artists to sort of engage in new forms of publishing, new forms of expression. I mean, there's a lot of good they bring too. And so I guess my challenge to this crowd would be, how can we move from a zero-sum game around some of these discussions to a positive-sum game? And of course, for better or for worse, we're in a situation where I think Europe needs to be a platform for the world to figure these things out, because the US isn't, because it's a mess, at least till 2020. China can't be, because it's not a free society. So if we limit ourselves merely to trying to solve these problems on a European level and trying to come up with European challenges without asking what is the type of rule set, ecosystem, and goals that the world and humanity needs, I honestly think we're selling ourselves short. Now, I need much more than a panel intervention to deal with a lot of the objections to that, but I hope that's the kind of discussion we can have when it comes to building these alliances.
So really, we have to go from a very fragmented idea to a moonshot and ecosystem perspective, right? We have time for a few questions.
Yes, thank you. And I try to repeat your question. I think the key point was, is there any bridges that we're trying to build into the e-government world, right? So an idea you could use, even if you want to hook up or to connect to the local system of your local administration and apply for a license on something. And yes, we are. So we're in talks with the e-government associations in Germany. Unfortunately, the e-government solutions, even though we have European standards, is still going to be nation by nation. In Germany, it's even getting worse. It's going to be Bundesland by Bundesland. So you know, it's a fight door to door. But we're in talks with those initiatives that are trying to offer e-governmental service, at least in Germany. That you can use your unique identifier also to log in for e-governmental purposes, because it's all based on open standards, so on IADS, and we're supporting that standard as well. So if the e-government is there one day, the net ID is an option to log into those systems as well.
We have time for one more question. Gentleman in the back.
Thank you very much for sharing. My name is Per Strömbäck. I'm the editor of Netopia.eu. You touched upon the topic of investment. I would just like to add that, or to remind everybody that the foundation of Silicon Valley's fortunes was a policy from 1958 called the Small Business Investment Act, which gave venture capitalists access to federal pension fund loan guarantees for every private dollar, 4 public dollars. This is 60 years ago. Is there any way that we could fathom that Europe would do something ambitious, and even if we did, we would be 60 years behind? So where should we look for answers? I think investment is a key word, but it maybe needs to be how can investment from other places, the platforms, the private investors, go to startups, and also content. I think also creative industries and content is part of the answer for how Sweden or Europe can find a third way. Thank you.
So very quickly, complete agreement on the problem. There's a lot of fragmentation. It's a national competence right now. We talked about that. We need to get our ministers, by the way, a bit more involved, because one of the worst things in this process is the civil servants are much more timid on a lot of these questions than their elected politicians, but they don't think on a European level very much. They make it to Brussels 1 or 2 or 3 times a year. There's a lot, I mean, there's a huge amount of value to unlock there that's much greater than the public funding. I would think about you mentioned other sources. There's also geographically other sources. I mean, there's a lot of developing country money that's looking for a safe haven. The US is very difficult because of a lot of the sort of, well, scrutiny on investments is good, but the US goes crazy. They end up just buying property, and wouldn't we want to get those property investments in the London real estate market into European startups instead? So there's a lot of work to do there, absolutely. And I hope that we have ministers and commissioners in the next year or two who focus on that.
And maybe we have also a 3 combination word called ICO, which is a topic for another discussion. So thank you, gentlemen, for a great panel. Please talk to them on applied AI, the net ID, and our larger political system, and enjoy the DLD conference. Thank you.